Hello and welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Andrew Jackson, but you can call me Drew. I'm your not-so-typical economics professor from an Ivy League university. And yes, I do own more than a few tweed jackets. Today, on another episode of this podcast, we're about to tackle a hot topic, the true worth of a college degree in today's dynamic job market.
And this is Emily, a college dropout and a marketing consultant who's somehow getting by without that heavy piece of paper. I'm here to shake things up a bit and challenge the age-old education narrative.
But first, let's lighten the mood a bit. What's one thing you did this week that our listeners wouldn't expect from a high-flying consultant like yourself?
Well, nothing too special, but I actually spent an evening trying to bake a sourdough loaf. Spoiler alert, it didn't rise to the occasion. But hey, life's about trying new things. How about you? Any non-academic adventures this week?
Funny you should ask. I found myself in a heated ping pong match with my 12-year-old neighbor. Let's just say I am more adept with a pen than a ping pong paddle. But it's great to have you here, Emily. Before we jump into the depths, mind sharing with our listeners why back in the day you decided to drop out of college?
For sure. You know, I was always told if I don't go to college, society would label me as a failure. But once I was there, it struck me how my classes were more about memorizing and less about the real world. I felt like my creativity was being boxed in by this one-size-fits-all approach.
But didn't you see any value in the structured learning and the discipline a college environment provides? I'm sure you had to battle through that internal conflict. What made you eventually take that plunge?
So there was a pivotal moment. I attended a guest lecture by this successful startup founder where he highlighted the value of real-world experiences, of learning by doing, and how he met his most influential mentors outside the college walls. That was it for me. I started to see a path that better suited my learning style. The college setup just didn't offer me that freedom.
It's always valuable to understand the diverse paths people take towards their careers. But what worked for you might not work for others. Don't you think for most students, the impulsiveness and risk associated with dropping out could lead to instability? I think the universities, despite all their flaws, provide a strong safety net, and not everyone has the capacity to take such big risks.
You're right, but it shouldn't lead to a fear-driven approach to education and career choices. We need to encourage more flexible pathways in education where people can explore different options without the pressure of a traditional 4-year degree. The fact is, my story isn't unique. There are many individuals with immense potential who simply don't fit the conventional educational mold. They might be brilliant in unconventional ways, but just don't thrive in the university setting.
I understand the call for flexibility, but we must be cautious. We can't overlook the empirical evidence showing the long-term benefits of a college education, which extend beyond just immediate job prospects. For the average person, getting a degree is still the advised path.
Well, I'm not advocating for abandoning education, but for redefining it. We're entering an era of creativity and innovation, and education should be about fostering individual strengths and passions, not just ticking boxes and passing tests. Just look at the greats like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Mark Zuckerberg, all college dropouts who revolutionized industries. They're proof that in today's world, it's more about what you can do, not where you studied.
I know, people love citing these examples, but they're not the norm, not even close. The vast majority of successful individuals are college graduates. Let's see, Sheryl Sandberg is from Harvard, Jeff Bezos from Princeton, and Tim Cook is from Duke University. See, education provides a solid foundation, a broad network, and a brand that opens many doors. And for every dropout success story, there are countless others who regret not completing their education.
Well, to be honest, I believe most of the education system is an expensive, time-consuming IQ sorting mechanism. Students waste 4 critical years of their lives, often ending up in a field unrelated to what they even studied. There are so many jobs in the world that should not require a college degree, but they still do. And so it's led to this massive increase in educational costs that is inexplicable.
But I think your perspective overlooks the broader fundamental benefits of a higher education. Universities provide more than just knowledge. They offer a very unique societal and cultural experience. You live away from home, you manage responsibilities, you collaborate with professors, you compete with your peers, and you participate in intellectual debates. These experiences are crucial in shaping well rounded individuals.
I get what you're saying, Professor, but these experiences aren't just confined to campuses anymore. Have you heard about the Thiel Fellowship? Since 2011, Peter Thiel has been giving out $100,000 to college students to drop out and start a company. Forbes once wrote an article predicting that the Thiel Fellowship will create lesser successful companies than degree holders. But 10 years later, those founders built some of the most breakthrough companies of the decade, like Ethereum, Figma, Loom, and Oil Rooms.
That's interesting. But it only represents a very small selective group in a highly specialized program. Not everyone has the same level of drive or access to resources. We should figure out ways to improve the system, not dismantle it based on anecdotal evidence.
Professor, with all due respect, it seems academia is too insulated. You're advocating for a system that's self-serving, perpetuating a cycle that benefits institutions more than students. It's high time we question this outdated model and prioritize practical, lifelong learning.
Well, I'm sorry to say, but that's a rather simplistic and somewhat naive view. You see, higher education has been a cornerstone of societal progress since decades. To dismiss the value of a structured learning based on a broad generalization is to overlook the countless individuals whose lives have been transformed for the better through their academic pursuits.
Do you know that the World Economic Forum suggests that many of today's students will be employed in jobs that don't even exist yet? The half-life of skills is shrinking. So what's left will be not blue-collar or white-collar jobs, but new-collar jobs that require skills that can only be acquired through alternative pathways. And colleges just aren't built for that.
It's easy to get caught up in the skills hype. The job market is indeed evolving, but so are the universities. We're increasingly integrating more technology, newer courses, and more practical elements like internships and project-led learning. I think it's a bit irresponsible to encourage young people to abandon higher education based on a romanticized view of alternative paths.
Professor, we're at a point where demonstrable skills are way more important than a degree hanging on the wall. I recently saw a tweet from a founder who has hired over 1,200 people, and not once has he asked to see proof of college degree. The best teachers, the best books, and the best peers are all on the internet. Yes, degrees are very nice to have, but that expensive piece of paper isn't the be-all and end-all. I have no doubt that disruptive change in education is coming.
Well, degrees aren't just nice to have. At the very least, they prove that you showed up, did your homework, passed complex subjects, and actually achieved something. Remember, universities have been the bedrock of education and innovation for centuries. They have a way of catching up, even leading change in some instances. I do acknowledge the socioeconomic barriers and the debt crisis in higher education, but this calls for reforms in funding, scholarships, and perhaps a rethinking of the value we place on different types of education.
Take James Cameron as an example. At the age of 20, he was a truck driver with big dreams of filmmaking, but without any means to afford film school. So he would sneak into the USC library to find research papers on intricate subjects like optical printing or special effects. He would simply take the staples out and photocopy whatever he could. And so for the cost of a few $100s in Xerox, he essentially gave himself a complete college education at a top film school without ever meeting a single professor. This, to me, is a clear representation of how resourceful learning can rival traditional paths.
That's a fascinating example of self-learning. It prompts me to think about how can we integrate more innovative learning methods into our existing system. I'm curious, what alternatives do you envision that could potentially complement or even revolutionize our current educational framework?
I think the concept of micro-credentials offer a great alternative. You can think of them as bite-sized, tailored chunks of learning, whether an online course, bootcamp certificate, or an apprenticeship from a university. In the future, people could stack these credentials together in place of a university degree. The idea is that it would provide a more affordable, perhaps more targeted, path towards continuous learning instead of a single 4-year stint in a college.
I think something like micro credentials could effectively complement rather than replace a college degree. See, education is fundamentally the pursuit of answers to three critical questions. One, what in life is worth doing? Two, what among many options would you really like to do? And three, what after experimentation are you really good at? Or in other words, your calling. And callings are seldom clear without a few years of trial and error. And so a university offers you an identity to shield yourself while you are undergoing this difficult, chaotic process of educating yourself. You become articulate, you understand moral issues, you make coherent arguments and informed judgments such that you can lay out strategies and pursue them successfully. Essential life skills that make us ready for the road ahead. So instead of bypassing universities, I'd like to see a future where there are many complementary avenues for acquiring valuable skills.
Beautifully put, Professor. Here's an idea. What if we turn this into a thought experiment? Let's strip down the concept of a university program to its core based on first principles. Hear me out. What if, instead of locking into a 4-year degree at one time, students had access to a flexible education program they could tap into whenever needed throughout their life?
So you're suggesting we transform college education from a finite, one-time stage in life to an ongoing, lifelong resource that adapts to individual needs and career paths.
Yes. Let's say the program is divided into flexible phases that could be activated voluntarily at any point, starting with an exploration phase, a buffet of learning opportunities where students are encouraged to sample various subjects and disciplines, discovering their unique passions and strengths before committing to a specific path. Imagine a scenario where a student can attend a course in quantum mechanics in the morning, an art history lecture in the afternoon, and end the day with a coding boot camp.
That's intriguing, but how would this fundamentally differ from the broad range of subjects across disciplines that universities already offer?
The key difference, Professor, is the element of choice and flexibility. Instead of a set curriculum, students could have the freedom to choose from an expansive range of subjects and experiences. It's not just about dipping your toes into different subjects. It's about igniting curiosity, experimenting without the fear of failing, and discovering what truly resonates with each student. It's like creating your own educational adventure.
I do see your point. This freedom could indeed foster a more profound engagement with learning. But wouldn't there be a risk of students spreading themselves too thin, dabbling in many areas but mastering none?
Well, the exploration phase wouldn't be about mastery. It'll be more about self-discovery. It will allow students to understand where their true interests and strengths lie before they commit to a specialized path.
I get it. In fact, this might also reduce the number of students who switch disciplines mid-course, giving them more control over their learning journey from day one. I think it sets an excellent foundation. How do we transition from this broad exploration to more focused learning?
Glad you asked. Let's call it the focus phase. Once students have discovered what they love and what they're great at, they can dive deeper into the chosen field. And by deep, I mean not just classroom learning, but internships, mentorships, hands-on work in real-world environments, maybe even opportunities to start entrepreneurial ventures, all under the umbrella of their chosen field.
I like the sound of that. A nice blend of theory and practice. I think the key here is to create a curriculum that's flexible yet robust. For example, a student focusing on environmental science might spend part of the semester in a lab, part in policy discussions, and part in fieldwork. Students could then be assessed, not just based on exams, but also based on project outcomes, research papers, and real-world impact.
Exactly. The focus phase could indeed be the bridge that connects academic exploration with professional excellence, shaping not just knowledgeable graduates, but innovative thinkers and industry leaders. And speaking of impact, what if we could replace majors with missions? The traditional degrees and disciplines often limit students to siloed fields of study. Missions, on the other hand, can be interdisciplinary and goal-oriented. They would focus on solving real problems like climate change, public health issues, or tech innovation.
Wow, that's a radical leap. But how would these missions be structured? Are we talking about completely doing away with disciplines like economics, biology, or engineering?
No, not at all. It's about reframing these disciplines within broader missions. For example, a student on a mission to reimagine smart cities might study urban planning, environmental science, and information technology together, learning how these disciplines intersect and contribute to creating advanced urban environments. And so to assess them, we'll look at their contribution to enhancing urban living, from reducing carbon footprints to improving transportation systems with smart technology.
Very interesting. Sounds like a practical, outcome-based approach to learning. But this model would require a fundamental change in how we structure our academic programs and measure academic success, and also a shift in how professors teach and interact with students.
Absolutely, Professor, which brings me to my initial point of pursuing lifelong learning rather than four-year degrees. Imagine students embarking on their careers at any point, gaining practical experience, and then returning to education to delve into advanced concepts or new emerging fields, either physically or remotely.
That's a great idea. So you're suggesting we break down the barriers between being a student and being a professional. The program could support students to join the workforce, apply their learning, and then when they're ready, whether it's to upskill, change careers, or deepen their knowledge in a specific area, they can return to education.
Precisely. A scenario where returning to education becomes a natural part of one's career journey. So it wouldn't just be about obtaining a degree and then saying goodbye to formal education, but about creating an ongoing partnership with the university, one that supports continuous growth throughout one's professional life.
With such a dynamic program, it forces me to wonder how we would assess and showcase student growth. What if, instead of traditional grades and resumes, we develop something more aligned with this continuous learning approach? I propose we create something like a skills graph, a living document that evolves with the students in real time, charting their progress, experiences, and their growing skill sets.
Brilliant. I can picture the skills graph as a digital interface where students can continuously update their learning milestones, project outcomes, and any practical experiences they gather both within and outside the university setting. It could actually be a great way to visually represent their growth, challenges overcome, and areas of expertise.
Right. For students, it will serve as a reflective tool and a roadmap. It will help them identify areas for growth, track their progress in real time, and plan their next learning objectives. And for employers, it would offer deeper insights and a nuanced view of a candidate's practical experiences, adaptability, and potential. The job interview then becomes less about ticking boxes and more about understanding the candidate's vision, their aspirations, and how they align with the company's goals.
That's it. A program that's adaptable, integrated, accessible, personalized, hands-on, interdisciplinary, and lifelong. Not just a degree factory, but a launchpad for innovators. I love it.
Emily, I start today ready for a debate, but I'm leaving with a wealth of ideas. Your perspectives are not just refreshing, they're essential for the evolving landscape of education. I think our listeners would agree that this has been an eye-opening discussion.
Likewise, Professor, I came in expecting to butt heads, but I'm walking away with a newfound respect for the role of college, as well as the potential for its transformation. It's clear that there's no one-size-fits-all in learning. Our conversation today has been a testament to that fact.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, I have to ask, any more sourdough baking in your future, or have you moved on to a new hobby?
No more baking for me. I'm thinking of taking up pottery next. There's something about creating with your hands that's oddly satisfying. How about you, Professor? Any more ping pong rematches planned?
Oh, definitely. I might even start training secretly to surprise my young neighbor. Can't let the academic community down, can I? But who knows? Maybe I'll join you in a pottery class one day. A professor has to keep learning too, right?
That's the spirit. And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in to today's episode. We hope our stories remind you that the path to success isn't always straight. It's the unique twists that make the journey worthwhile.
The HR Basement Podcast is brought to you by Unbury, which is the most holistic and immersive talent assessment platforms out there. And for this special episode, we've partnered with the brilliant folks at Wiser, India's leading skilling marketplace, offering a broad range of courses for curious learners. Thank you everyone for listening. And remember, whether you're in a classroom, online, or getting your hands dirty with pottery clay or sourdough, never stop learning. Until next time, this is Dr. Andrew Jackson.
And this is Emily Carter signing off. You are listening to the HR Basement podcast, where unconventional paths are celebrated. Remember, the door to this basement is always open. Degrees or not, everyone's welcome.